Geeks and geekettes, comic fans around the world, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Wednesday morning. It's time for Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's get right to it. Dan Battles, if Marvel gave you the chance to write Amazing Spider-Man, would you prefer to write a married or single Peter Parker? I hate One More Day. Apparently you're not alone. I think I'd prefer to write a married Spider-Man, just because I've never written a married character before. And it would be interesting. It's an interesting dynamic. And so if I were given my druthers, which I'll never be given, I would write Mr. and Mrs. Parker. Because I think the Peter Parker-Mary Jane relationship, it's fun, right? Comics Gatekeeper. Where do you stand on comic book criticism? Do you think a healthy industry needs it? Are we in our current safe situation due to the lack of it? Ever have any harsh criticism of your own work you can look back on and laugh about later? Yeah, I mean, criticism, you kind of have to let it roll off your back. My philosophy is that dogs bark, but the caravan moves on. Generally, I don't write work to please critics. I don't write work hoping to win an Eisner. I write for casual readers. I don't really even write for comic book fans per se. I write for casual readers. I write for that imaginary person who's picking up a comic book for the first time. And my job is to engage them not only in the story and the characters, but in the medium itself. So, set a high bar there. So I'm always thinking of that, as opposed to what some, comic book pseudo-intellectual will think. And that's the problem, is you have two kinds of critics. You have the critic who can't see the forest for the trees. He's takes an academic approach. He spends half his time discussing the deep themes and context of the comic, and the other half of the time apologizing for liking comic books. And who needs that? The other breed of critic is the wannabe, the person who wishes they were writing and drawing comics themselves. And so, of course, most comic books are not going to please them. They're either sycophantic about the work they like or too harsh on the work they don't, for all the wrong reasons. And yes, the industry does need criticism. Any industry needs criticism. But we don't really have objective criticism in comics. A lot of it is politically driven. If you didn't vote for the same person I voted for, then your comics suck, and all of your work always sucks. A lot of times these are fans who were fans of a person's work when they were younger, and then they find out as they get older, I don't agree with this person politically, even if the work has absolutely no political content. So yeah, it's not, and I think this goes across the board. I don't like so much of the criticism I see, literary criticism and criticism of movies is driven much the same way. So there's no objective truth anymore, anywhere. Jerry's email. Have you ever had martial arts or weapons training? I go to the range. These are not my guns, although that lever action looks sweet. It's just a stock range photo, but I go to the range. I do firearms. I am conversant with them mostly because of my dad. My dad was a gunsmith. I remember when I was about 4, going to the police station with him, and they took a mugshot and fingerprints so that he could have a license to transport firearms legally, because he worked for gun shops around the area. He worked for gun shops in suburban Philadelphia and in Philadelphia itself. He repaired guns for police officers and hunters. And when growing up, there were guns all over the house, particularly the 2 weeks leading up to hunting season. I remember our dining room table being stacked with shotguns that my dad had to repair before these guys could go out for opening season. And, as I said, a lot of guns around the house when I was a kid. This is the first gun I ever owned. It was a Christmas gift from my dad. I was 5 years old. It is not a Daisy air rifle. It'll do more than shoot your eye out. It's a Winchester 22 short pump, and my dad cut down the stock and the barrel to be more scaled for me as a kid. And as you can see, I still have it. Even made a little brass name tag on the stock. It's one of my most treasured possessions. As far as martial arts go, no. My only training would be watching kung fu movies and talking to people who are martial arts types who do it. I'm not particularly athletic. I'm a big clumsy oaf. I don't think anybody wants me at their dojo. But guns, I know. Guns, I know. Hey, Jerry, you got yourself a twin spin. Very, very nice. Do you prefer Batman as a dark, brooding loner or surrounded by other heroes in the Batman family? Now, the funny thing about Batman is if you treat him like the sad psycho loner, sales go down. And fans seem to like Batman solo. Casual readers do not. And back in the day when comics still sold on the newsstand, casual readers were the ones who called the shots. So every time they experimented with a more singular Batman character, sales fell. So they had to, hurriedly bring back Robin and Batgirl and all the rest to bring sales back up. And during my 11 years writing on various Batman titles, I obviously enjoyed him having a Batman family because I wrote so many spin-off titles. Nightwing, Robin. I wrote a bunch of Catwoman. I wrote a Batgirl Year One. Obviously I dug it. But I think, it's cool when you keep the number down to just a few. I mean, Batman, Batgirl, Robin, now Nightwing, and Alfred. Yeah, and, pretty much keep it there. But over the years, we've seen so many additions to the Batman family. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know who a lot of these characters even are. I couldn't name them if you held a gun to my head. So maybe less is more when it comes to the Batman family. Hey, Jerry gets a triple spin. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, when you were growing up, did you consider yourself a Marvel guy or a DC guy or both or neither? This question came up a lot. I remember once in junior high, I was at my locker and a small group of nerds, I was a nerd too, a small group of nerds came up and said, look, you decide for us. Which is better, DC or Marvel? Like I was the final authority on this because they all knew that I lived and breathed comics 24/7. So they were going to go with my decision, which was better, Marvel or DC. And I said, hey, whatever you like. I mean, it's still my opinion today. I mean, why pick a side? You don't have to choose. But growing up, the choice was pretty obvious in the Silver Age. DC, they were putting out quality stuff, fun stuff. But over at Marvel, they were so in your face with Kirby and Ditko and Gene Colan and, Jim Steranko. And they were just doing the stuff that you really brought you back again and again and again. The DC was so mired in doing stories that were gimmicky or they were puzzle or riddle stories. And Marvel was more going for the heart, going for the high drama. And DC saw what Marvel was doing and they thought it was lowbrow entertainment. But hey, I was a kid. I wanted lowbrow entertainment. I was lowbrow. I wanted an immediate experience. I wanted no holds barred, crazy action, and Marvel gave it to me, and DC wasn't. But I didn't abandon DC entirely. I still faithfully read all of their war titles, and love Sergeant Rock and Haunted Tank, and it's still some of my favorite comics ever are the DC war titles. Another comic company that I was, addicted to was the Warren horror comics, creepy and eerie. And, I tried never to miss an issue of these books because, in this period, boy, they were at their prime with the top comic book talents in the United States, all, working for Jim Warren, doing these 8-page horror stories. Yvonne Magila, I know that you've made some comics with Sly's actual face in it, like The Expendables and now Rambo. Have you ever made any comics with Schwarzenegger or Van Damme's face in it? Well, briefly, I was working on a comic called The Governator, which featured Arnold Schwarzenegger as a superhero. Literally, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he had an alternate identity as the Governator, fighting crime in California. And it was produced by Stan Lee, which meant I got to work a lot with Stan Lee. Stan totally developed the series with some other folks, and then I was assigned to write the scripts, plot and scripts, and the rest of it. Basically turned it into a comic book. And the coolest thing was getting to work a lot with Stan. I never met Stan in person. I've been in the same room with him, but never shook hands. But when we were doing The Governator, we got to spend a lot of time talking on the phone. It was just fascinating hearing this guy critique my work, suggest changes. Basically, to hear Stan Lee talking out loud about the comics medium was very, very cool. And it was fun. It was a real superhero pastiche. It was part action story, part parody, and I had some goofy humor and crazy villains. And generally, a good time was had by all until the thing came out about the housekeeper and Arnold having an illegitimate child. And that's when the wheels came off. I mean, Arnold was out there promoting it. I mean, he did a People magazine cover shoot just to promote this comic book. And he, Arnold's a salesman, if nothing else. And he was pushing it. We were probably looking at pretty huge sales, but it was not to be. I wrote 3 issues. I think 2 issues were completed. There was art being done on the 3rd. We had covers done and everything else, and it all had to be ash canned because of controversy. Maybe they'll see the light of day someday, but I doubt it. This project is dead. If you ever meet me at a convention, there's another story I can tell you on background, but I'm not going to commit it to the internet. Now, as far as Jean-Claude Van Damme in comics, it's funny you should ask. I did an issue of The Simpsons called Simpsons International, and the gimmick in this issue was there were 3 short comic book stories that showed foreign interpretations of The Simpsons. The conceit was that The Simpsons were not reprinted overseas; they were reimagined overseas for foreign audiences. So we had a manga comic. We had I forget the 3rd comic. It might have been a Latin American comic, and we did a Belgian comic. I wanted to do a comic in the Belgian style, in the Herge style, and so I contacted Ty Templeton, and I said, Ty, would you want to work on this short satire of The Simpsons done in the Belgian comic style? And he says, oh, yeah, that'd be great. And he says, in fact, I just got back from Belgium, which was a little bit of serendipity. And he said, send me the script and I'll get to work on it. And I said, no, Ty, I want you to write it too, because Ty's a really funny writer. I mean, just a terrific, cutting sense of humor, just laugh out loud stuff. So I said, no, I want you to write it too. I want you to have free reign to do a Belgian version of The Simpsons, which, as you can see, he did in the Belgian comic art style, even down to the way the lettering balloons, the word balloons are done. And I said to him, do you have any idea what you want to write? And he goes, no, I really don't. But he says, I'm going to include the 3 things that Americans know about Belgium. I'm going to include waffles, the Smurfs, and Jean-Claude Van Damme. And as you can see, he did. So there, I got to work on a comic that had JCVD in it, even though I didn't write it. It was my idea to bring Ty on board. And boy, I'm so glad I did. That issue worked out so well. Josh Reed, what are your thoughts on the movie Payback with Mel Gibson? I know it's an adaptation of the Parker novels, and I was wondering if it was faithful to the book or not. Also, if you have never seen it, I would recommend it. Really slick action movie with prime Gibson if you like Mel Gibson. Yeah, I dig me some Mel Gibson. I like Mel Gibson. He commands the screen whenever he's on it. And this was a good adaptation of the first Parker novel. And but the funny thing is I don't know if you know this, there's two versions of this movie. The original theatrical version, which, well, not the original, not the first cut version, but the release version, which shows, which is vastly different in the second half than the original first cut. Studio wasn't happy with the way the movie ended, and they asked Mel Gibson to rewrite and direct a new, basically, second and third acts for the movie. And so the movie departs very much from the original first cut. And you can see the first cut. It's available on DVD. It's called Payback Straight Up. And it's the original cut of the flick. And it's closer to the novel. Now, I enjoy both versions very much, but I prefer the original cut. And I like how it ends. The studio apparently didn't like how it ended because it was more in a 70s vein. It doesn't end slam bang kaboom the way that Mel Gibson ended. And of course, Mel, being Mel, he has a torture scene because for some reason Mel loves being tortured in movies. I don't know if that says something about him or he just thinks, that's a great dramatic device to see the protagonist reduced to a quivering heap before the film ends. But in any case, yeah, I did enjoy it. Now, there have been lots of other Parker movies of various types. It's been adapted all over the world into films. James Brown even played Parker in a film. And of course, the most famous one being Lee Marvin in Point Blank, which is also an adaptation of The Hunter. Most of these other Parker movies are adaptations of books that are later in the series. The best of them is The Outfit, which it's Robert Duvall playing Parker. And for my money, it's the closest one to the novels, of the feel of the novels, the deconstructed heist plotline that was the signature of all of these books. One of the worst is Slayground. It's just a terrible, I think, straight to cable piece of nonsense that introduces an unnecessary supernatural element to the story. Just goofy and tedious. Parker's even been played by a woman in an adaptation by Jean-Luc Godard. If you're familiar with Jean-Luc Godard, you know that he probably strayed a lot from the source material. When you watch a Godard adaptation, you're like, why did he even bother saying this was an adaptation? It's so completely different from what he says he's adapting. The most recent iteration was Jason Statham in the movie called Parker, and it's not good. It's like a C grade Jason Statham movie. It's a Z grade Parker movie. I like Jason Statham. I really enjoy a lot of his films, but he's really totally miscast. And it's just not a good movie. It's not an accurate portrayal of the Parker character. Now, Gibson was dead on. Nihilistic, single-minded, driven. He's just the perfect guy to be in a movie about a heist gone wrong. And I think Gibson really appreciated the source material, even though he was under pressure to make changes to it when he did his reshoots. Now, for my money, the guy that should have played Parker, if they were to have made a series of movies in the 60s when the novels were first released, would have been Christopher George. He had that sort of rugged, good looks, sort of rough-hewn, used up looking guy, rangy. I think he would have been absolutely perfect. When I read the Parker novels, this is what I picture Parker looking like. A true badass. Hey, what you reading? Well, I picked up this big fat book from Fantagraphics called Will Elder, the Mad Playboy of Art. It's a terrible title. But he worked at Mad and he worked at Playboy. Yeah, we get it. Now, Will Elder was one of the original Mad artists and really the guy who set the tone for the magazine. Just a top talent, just a complete artistic virtuoso, able to ape any art style that you put in front of him. I mean, here he's satirizing Virgil Finlay. I mean, who satirizes Virgil Finlay? But he's doing it perfectly. That looks like a sort of crazy version of a 1940s sci-fi pulp illustration. I love the little glass cutter in the insectoid aliens. So, but mostly he's known for setting the style at Mad with all of these ancillary gags. This what he called chicken fat. He would take Harvey Kurtzman's scripts and layouts and just add, background gags and signage and wordplay and visual gags, and just throw so many out there that you had to laugh. I mean, they didn't all hit, but the sheer quantity of jokes that he threw into every panel would have, some of them would hit home and crack you up. He's capable of just drawing these indelible characters. And what I like best about Will Elder's stuff is there's no meanness here. He's mocking things he loves. And I think successful parody, that you've got to like the thing you're making fun of so that you fully appreciate it. You can't mock something that you scorn and have people enjoy it or find it funny, because you're going to miss a lot of stuff. If you don't like something, you miss the appeal of it. If you don't understand the appeal of something, you can't really make fun of it. But Elder's thing was, was just crowding the page. He's giving you your money's worth with as many jokes and gags as he could possibly cram in. And as I said, he could ape any artistic style. I mean, this is, indistinguishable from the Disney style. It's a perfect aping of a Mickey Mouse comic. And, he's a terrific storyteller. I mean, just great and funny stuff. But he was also an artistic virtuoso. Here he is, aping Norman Rockwell paintings. And he could do a lot of this kind of thing. And he was aligned with Harvey Kurtzman throughout his career. I mean, they worked at Mad, they worked at Trump, they worked at Help, they worked at Humbug together. I mean, these guys stuck together through thick and thin, and I guess their crowning achievement, or their most long-lasting association, was on the long-running comic in the back of Playboy, Little Annie Fanny. And Little Annie Fanny really brings together all of Elder's talents. His ability with watercolors and inks and caricature and all the rest. William Stout writes an essay in the book detailing how this work was done. And it's amazing. I mean, Kurtzman would do the layouts and then do various layers of tissue paper. This is Kurtzman. This is before Elder even sees the art. Do various layers of tissue paper with the various colors on it, indicating how he saw it being portrayed in color. And then Elder would lay down various layers of watercolors and send them to Kurtzman, and Kurtzman would write copious notes, and Elder would make corrections. I mean, this was a laborious way of working, but the end results are amazing. And and thanks to Playboy's expert reproduction of the comics, a lot of this detail isn't lost. Although if you ever get to see a Little Annie Fanny original, it's amazing. They simply could not be printed in such a way to capture the quality of the originals. They are, because Elder worked in layers with watercolor, the originals are luminescent. They're really amazing. They're like Maxfield Parrish paintings. They seem to have a glow all of their own, and just quite extraordinary. But the amazing thing about Elder's talent, even though you have this meticulous method of producing these stories, it doesn't lose the animation and caricature elements of the comic itself. As detailed and richly detailed as these are, they're still comics in a way that most painted comics aren't comics to me. You may have a favorite guy who paints comic book stories, but to me, they look dead on the page. They look static. the paint takes away the hand of the artist. It takes away the liveliness and animation within the panels. But Elder, because of the style in which he chose to work, he manages to keep that. And as densely colored as these stories are, they still have a life of their own as a comic. So anyway, Big Fat Will Elder book. Take a look. Very cool stuff. It's filled with things that have never before been reprinted. And just a real treasure trove of a great American comic book artist. Hey, one more question. Rammer Fan 1. You open your videos by saying what you do is write comic books, but you also write novels. Why not mention that up front? Well, I'm going to mention it now. How about that? Let's close out with a little bit of me tootling my own horn. Yeah, I've written over 30 novels, but I don't consider myself a novelist. People go, oh, I'm a novelist. Hey, I'm a screenwriter. I write for the cinema. No, I'm a comic book writer through and through. It's in my DNA. It's all I ever wanted to do. I didn't write comics with the ambition of writing something else that I thought was superior, because to me, there isn't anything superior to comic books. I love comic books, and that's all I ever wanted to write. But I didn't always get as many assignments in comics as I, needed to survive as a professional writer, to be perfectly, brutally frank with you. So I began writing novels, and then turned out I kind of liked it. The comics are still my thing, but I dig writing the novels, and they're all still available. They're all still in print from various publishers, working in every genre you can imagine, except romance. I haven't written a romance novel yet, probably never will. But I managed to keep on writing and thinking of stuff and justifying my existence in this world by turning out novels. And it turns out I enjoy it. So I'm mentioning the novels now. But when I say, what do I do for a living? I write comics. That's really what I do. I'm a comic book guy and always will be. I will not leave comic books behind for any other medium. Hey, if you want to contact me with questions, comments, pictures of your doggy or your kitty, or whatever, recommendations for comics you think I should read, go to Bruno Bookstore at gmail.com. Bruno Bookstore, just like it sounds, at gmail.com. It's the most direct way of reaching me. And if you want to think about subscribing here, it kind of helps me out at YouTube. And if you want to go that extra step, you can also go to Subscribestar, hook yourself up with a subscription there. And in exchange, you get some tchotchkes. You get some signed comics. You get monthly digital goodies sent to your email address. Every once in a while, I'll do something crazy, like a Chuck Dixon minifig that goes out to subscribers. If you wanted to have Chuck Dixon included in your gaming experience for whatever perverse reason you might have. So anyway, that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.